Hi, this is Jennifer Brady, reporting for my vulnerable group, eating disorders. Definition of eating disorder types: anorexia nervosa are those whose BMI drop below the 15% mark. They have a legitimate fear of becoming fat and a fear of food. These individuals do tend to have a body dysmorphia associated with the disease. Those with bulimia nervosa is an individual who binges an enormous amount of food as though they have lost control. Immediately after, though, they tend to binge. They purge their food via either laxatives, over-exercising, or inducing vomiting. These individuals do tend to be of a normal weight. Binge eating is similar to bulimia in that an individual binges an enormous amount of food as though they have lost control. What differs is that they do not purge the food after the binging episode. And those with super obese is an individual whose BMI is greater than the 30%. These individuals do tend to binge eat. They are prone to depression and tend to have significant health problems. The population continued, and I will cover more of this in later slides, but there is a genetic link to those who suffer from eating disorders, as those afflicted tend to be in clusters meaning family groups. Environment also plays a role in an individual's eating disorder. And the rest we will go over in later slides. The health disparity amongst this group, those afflicted with eating disorders may have a difficult time finding easily accessible, affordable care. The treatment course for eating disorders requires extensive counseling and breaking of the disordered cycle. Counseling is expensive. Not all insurance covers counseling. Inpatient centers are extremely expensive, and not all are covered. It was found that an average of 39-day cost for an inpatient treatment was about $54,000. Eating disorders, especially anorexic and bulimia, tend to be thought to afflict only white women, so there is an embarrassment associated with a male seeking help for an eating disorder. Minorities also do tend to be underdiagnosed. And then those who suffer with eating disorders need help in addressing their weight, depression, and managing their compulsions. And this will take a multidisciplinary team approach. I thought this graphic was interesting. One thing that I liked about it was the different statements, like affluent students were nearly 2 times more likely to get treatment. White students were nearly 2 times more likely to be diagnosed than those with color. Females were almost 5 times more likely to be diagnosed with an eating disorder than males. And then females were almost 1.5 times more likely to get treatment as compared to males. The population size statewide, about 4% of female students and 1.4% male students have identified as having an eating disorder between the years 2011 to 2013. In 2015, about 25% of the population were considered obese. Nationally, 30 million individuals suffer from an eating disorder, and an estimated 160 million Americans are either obese or overweight. Internationally, worldwide, it is estimated that 70 million individuals suffer with an eating disorder. That is nearly 1% of the entire world population. And then 1.9 billion adults in 2016 were considered overweight. Of these, over 650 million were considered obese. The social determinants of health, those identified, some of those include healthcare services. Access to healthcare services is a large barrier for this vulnerable population group. As discussed earlier, it can be very expensive to obtain treatment, and not all is easily accessible. Health insurance coverage has increased over the years, but not all plans cover the cost of eating disorders. Access to healthy foods, difference in availability and cost of healthier food items, as well as other individual level factors may substantially limit the opportunity for healthy eating, especially among less wealthy individuals. Social support. Overcoming eating disorders requires social support. Food is very much a part of our social and everyday lives. Not all may have the support group needed to overcome these disorders. Overcoming takes time and understanding, and really having a good support group will be key in helping the individual overcome these disorders. Other social determinants may be physical barriers. Those who are considered extremely obese and those severely anorexic may have difficulty in physically seeking care, and this is where it is extremely critical to have a support system to help with these needs. Education. Lack of education concerning harm done to the body through either starvation, purging, binging, obesity, etc. may prevent the desire to seek help. Lack of knowledge on how to prevent obesity may also be prevalent. Within our school system, there should be encouragement of physical activity. Rather, there has been a decrease in physical activity due to demands to meet certain scores on standardized testing. Healthy food options are also more limited in school due to budget issues, as schools tend to sell the more popular food items. Contributing factors, biological attributes include, on this side, we're thinking more anorexia or bulimia, having a close relative with an eating disorder, having a close relative with a mental health condition, history of dieting, and then a type 1 insulin-dependent diabetic. They have found that approximately 1/4 of women diagnosed with type 1 diabetes will develop an eating disorder. The most common pattern is skipping insulin injections, known as diabulimia, which can obviously be deadly. Psychosocial attributes, these individuals tend to have perfectionism, anxiety, and body image dysmorphia. Social attributes, a community emphasis that thin is beautiful and the only acceptable body image, weight stigma, these individuals may be teased or bullied. Contributing factors also for binge eating and obesity, having a family member with obesity. Studies have identified genes that increase hunger and food intake, thus increasing the risk of obesity. Psychosocial attributes, depression and anxiety can contribute to overeating, lack of exercise, and lack of activity or motivation. Food is often seen as a coping mechanism when faced with difficulties. And then social attributes. Food is involved in almost every social situation in which individuals engage in. And then the CDC also stated that having lack of access to sidewalks or safe hiking trails may lead an individual to choose not to bike or walk, or thus leading them to a sedentary lifestyle. The root cause of the issue really comes down to these individuals tend to suffer from anxiety, depression, and are impulsive. They use the food and unhealthy behaviors in overwhelming and stressful situations. In the short term, these behaviors relieve anxiety and stress. Long term, they may actually increase anxiety and stress. Until better coping skills are learned, they will use food or lack of thereof. With anorexia nervosa, they feel a sense of control over their situation by controlling their weight, controlling how much they eat. Maslow hierarchy of needs, I found that MET included love and belonging and safety. These individuals do tend to have support system and they tend to be safe. Unmet was self-actualization, esteem, and physiological. These anticipated functional levels, these individuals tend to be able to physiologically function to a point. With severely low BMI and lack of food, there tends to be lower amounts of energy. With severely high BMI, they're at risk for breathing issues, difficulty sleeping, arthritis, and difficulty moving. With lack of self-actualization and esteem issues, these individuals may struggle socially and they lack coping skills. Likely health outcomes, eating disorders can be life-threatening. It can lead to electrolyte imbalances, hypertension, arthritis, etc. With counseling, this population can learn better coping mechanism. There is no one fix for every individual. Treatment needs to be catered to each person. The communicable diseases or infections, those afflicted with eating disorders are at a higher risk for infections. Those with obesity are more prone to post-op infections and nosocomial infections. Obviously, having a healthy body leads to a healthy immune system where we can fight off communicable diseases. Non-communicable diseases or infection. Those with anorexia and bulimia tend to be afflicted with fatigue, insomnia, low blood pressure, lack of menstruation, irregular heart rhythms, electrolyte imbalances, eroding teeth, dehydration, and anemia. Binge eating and obesity, they may have hypertension, obstructive sleep apnea, osteoarthritis, heart disease, and strokes. Type 2 diabetes, digestive issues, and gynecological or sexual dysfunctions. Treatment includes the first priority for anorexia and bulimia is to help them obtain and maintain an appropriate BMI. Typically, this is done through hospitalization, tube feeding, monitoring of intake. Electrolyte issues need to be resolved. Dentist appointments to address eroding teeth. Long-term counseling to learn coping skills and helping learn how to manage anxiety and depression. This may include medications. Binge eating and obesity. Those with type 2 diabetes will need immediate help in managing their insulin and glucose levels via medications. BiPAP or CPAP to help with sleep apnea. Medications as needed for cardiovascular disease. Counseling to learn coping skills. Nutritionists to help the individual learn appropriate caloric intake. Exercise and personal trainers, and support groups. Self-care and self-harm. Those with self-harm, 1 in 5 with anorexia nervosa attempt suicide. It's higher than in those with depression, schizophrenia, or any other mental health disorder. Body dissatisfaction, particularly among girls, can lead to suicidal behaviors. These individuals do tend to be at higher risk for depression and anxiety. WebMD recommends in the self-care that those with eating disorders set realistic self-improvement goals that they can easily obtain. And then those who are obese may have a difficult time taking care of themselves. They may have difficulty showering, dressing, and completing other activities of daily living. Risk for harm by or to others. Some of those with eating disorders have a history of being sexually or physically abused. Traumatic experiences put these individuals at risk for developing eating disorders. A study conducted back in 2005 found roughly that 46% of individuals with anorexia nervosa had been sexually abused as a child. Obesity is prevalent in those who were sexually abused as children. Those who are abused tend to turn to binge eating as a means of coping. And binge eating is at least 6 times more common in people with obesity and 3 to 4 times more common in people with obesity who reports a history of childhood sexual abuse. And those are my references.